All right, so we call to order the special meeting of the Signal Mountain Town Council Tuesday, March 17th. We will stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. And is there anyone here for the invocation tonight? We'll have a moment of silence after the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please take your seats. You weren't 5 minutes late. He can hear you. So we'll have Carol take the roll call.
Vice Mayor Amy Speak. Here. Councilmember Cheryl Graham is absent. Councilmember Bill Lusk.
Here.
Councilmember Susanna Murdoch.
Here.
Mayor Dan Landrum.
Here. Before we get into the discussion items, we don't have on here a vote to suspend the regular order of business, which means we aren't going to have a citizen's opportunity to address council tonight. But we should vote on that. So I move that we suspend regular order and eliminate that. What we're basically doing, and we might want to adopt this to make sure we're doing this right all the time, is at the beginning of the council meetings, we can vote that this is the agenda that we're going to follow. So since that is not on the agenda, my motion will be to accept the agenda as it's printed.
Second.
Second. Any discussion?
On the motion, I want to make sure that we're clear that you're on the motion to suspend that portion.
No. The motion is, I clarified before I made the motion. The motion is to accept the agenda as presented. The agenda as presented doesn't include that element. And that was her second, correct?
Yeah.
So discussion? We can talk about that later, but we ought to look at it and just really make sure that we're doing it right so that we're doing it right. It's not hard to do, but it's particular as to the way you do those things. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Carries 4-0. We have mostly discussion items tonight. Well, they're probably all going to, some of these are going to run into each other as we talk about them, but scheduled council meetings, we have one scheduled for Monday night. That this one can preclude that, but we should probably, I don't know if we need to vote on that or not. And also, I don't know if everybody knows, but the Tennessee State Legislature is going to make it probably, maybe as early as tonight, but probably tomorrow, possible for us to do online meetings.
Good.
They've got a lot of folks that are fussing about it. We can't do it as of right now, but we might be able to do it as of tomorrow, which would be great. So do we need to make a motion, you think, to suspend the next meeting, and then we'll wait and...
Can we just suspend the next meeting, and if online is available, then we'll proceed according to the legislature?
Yeah. Well, let's do the one, and then... Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. So I make a motion that we suspend the Monday... What's the date of the Monday meeting?
26th. Is it?
Monday, March, let's make sure we get it
23rd.
I move that we suspend the Monday, March 23rd meeting.
Second.
What,
Wait a second.
are you going to suspend or cancel?
Can't suspend something you're not holding, so we need to cancel it, don't we? I'd like to modify my motion. Would you, I don't know who you got down as the second.
I've got Susanna down as the second. So, okay.
All right, so, yeah, move we cancel the Monday, March 23rd meeting.
Second.
Any other discussion?
I wonder if it might be prudent just to cancel all future meetings until the governor removes the state of emergency, and hold electronic meetings when and if they're allowed.
Oh, yeah, because then we'd have to meet to vote on the next one, wouldn't we?
Oh, that's interesting. Maybe, yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
I agree. That's a good point.
So
I think we're all going to have to get used to conducting business via teleconference, so.
I'd like to
hopefully
withdraw my
that'll-
motion.
Well, before you,
Well, wait,
you go too fast.
what we're trying to get done.
I know.
Time, space,
I think
confusion.
regardless of what happens with the electronic, you're gonna cancel the next meeting. So you can go ahead and vote on that, and then
Okay.
make a separate motion to establish protocol for electronic meetings if allowed from then on.
You
That-
comfortable with that?
That's what you're saying?
Yeah, cancel
Yeah.
in-person meetings until the governor lifts.
So let's vote on this one, then we'll do that.
Yeah,
Is that
I'm
okay?
agree. Yep.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 4-0. Why don't you move?
So I'd like to move that we suspend in-person council meetings until such time as the governor lifts the state of emergency.
Second.
Hold on.
You can't write faster than that?
Until such time as the governor
Lifts.
lifts, thank you. I couldn't remember the word. The state of emergency. Okay, got it.
Could-
Thank you.
Could you add and, in lieu of, hold electronic meetings
Yeah, just
if permitted?
before we write that, I'm looking at the advisory just to see if there's any wording in there. Do you recall what their wording was?
No.
Is that the Tennessee Coalition for Open Government language?
Yeah, there's two of them that they sent out today. I think this is the COVID-19 Q&A is the title of it. Because it has a question in there about suspension of meetings. It's not that one, is it? Here it is. Consider using technology. So this one's for staff meetings. Have you had a chance to see this document?
That one.
This is what should we do about staff meetings, and it's,
Oh, yes, I did.
so there's
Con-
recommendation on
consider-
that.
Teleconferencing.
Yeah. By the way, one of the questions in this was can the mayor declare a quarantine, and no, you can't. Okay, I don't see any specific guidance, so I think we're probably safe figuring it out as we go. So what's the motion?
So at this point, what I have is suspend in-person council meetings until such time as the governor lifts the state of emergency.
We could amend that to say, and in lieu of in-person council meetings, hold electronic meetings.
Yeah, pending passage of appropriate legislation.
I will second the additions.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
And in lieu of in-person council meetings,
The
Hold.
council shall hold meetings electronically if and when approved by the state legislature. Is that okay?
Now, there will be some guidance from them on what's allowed, so we'll have to follow that, obviously. But I think one of the things they mentioned Zoom meetings, and there may be some other stuff, and that's probably what's going on right now, is they're hammering out the details of that. All right, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 4-0. I should have mentioned earlier, Cheryl Graham's not here because they're down in Florida. That's why they're absent. Everybody's fine with them. Second discussion item, scheduled board and committee meetings. So the question is, what about all our boards and committees? Do we suspend those the same way?
I think we should, and I think
Yeah.
some of the boards or committees are already, following recommendations and skipping in-person meetings.
If we're suspending council, we should suspend.
Anything
board
underneath
meetings.
should-
Yeah.
Do you know if the provisions will allow for them to meet in the same manner? or is it strictly to the governing body itself?
I don't know.
Either.
We haven't seen it yet, so
Yeah.
if they could, that'd be great. Though, it's gonna be more complicated. You're gonna have to have a tech to set this whole thing up. So, we don't know who that tech is.
Well, it could be as simple as using freeconferencecall.com.
Maybe.
That would allow public to
Zoom.
participate.
As long as the
in it.
public can see it, yeah.
It's what?
Yeah, I agree, if they allow the public to see it, but we'll have to go with what, I don't know, they may just say as long as it meets these standards, too.
And it depends, one of the exceptions to open meetings is the 911 board, which I sit on, and we are allowed to participate electronically, because there's also a provision that if you miss, I think it's 3 meetings, you're automatically removed from the board. Because of that, they allow that, and when we have members that participate, it's just by conference call. It's just voice only. If everyone is in a different place, that might be a little more
Right.
problematic, but the standard is there that a simple conference call can suffice.
Do we make that call in some kind of a resolution for them? I guess that's the question, or do we, I mean, we wouldn't want any meetings of 10 or more people to take place in here. And if you've got, the problem is if it's a planning commission meeting and a bunch of people want to come, they can't come, and then their ability to participate is, that one's going to be complicated anyway.
I've participated in several seminar-type events where you get a code and everybody calls in, and everybody can hear what's going on, and they usually have one presenter that has the screen that goes through whatever the seminar is presenting,
Right.
and then everybody can participate.
The problem, though, is citizens' opportunity to participate.
Well, I mean, you give them the code and they can call in too.
I just can't imagine, I mean, maybe I'm being too broad, but it just seems like any kind of business that would need to be conducted wouldn't be so urgent during this state of emergency that we find ourselves in, that it couldn't wait until the state of emergency is lifted, so,
But the
So-
problem with that, thank you. Problem with that, though, is if you've got somebody who's wanting to build something or business going forward or wants to present something, there's law that says that we have to follow up on that. If they put in an application, the planning commission, that needs to come before the planning commission, we have to see it.
I think we can do that on a case-by-case, though. I mean, I think
Right.
in the next 4 weeks, we can kind of do.
address
what
maybe
the
the
president
things that
has
come
said.
up.
Every 15 days, maybe we reassess. So maybe we can use that as
I think
as a
so.
guide.
I don't
'Cause
think,
I agree with you. I don't think there's going to be anything that urgent. And if there is, we can all communicate via email and then address that accordingly.
Sure. So I think the question I'm asking, if I'm asking something for us to vote on, is does this body basically make the same rule, that we wrote just a minute ago for all of
I
our
think,
committees?
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, if we are saying that we don't want to meet as a body because we're concerned about the germ factor and the transmission, then nobody else should be asked to meet
Absolutely.
Right.
on behalf of town business. So
I think
I
we're-
think all meetings need to be suspended until the state of emergency in the state of Tennessee is lifted.
And I don't think it's as much as anyone should be asked to do it, we just want to make sure they don't decide to do it.
Right, just take the question mark
Yeah, right.
Right,
away from
absolutely.
put the period at the end of the
Right.
sentence and
That's-
don't leave a
that
question
was
mark.
the- Yeah,
So for sake of simplicity, could we just amend the one we just did to include not only the council,
Yes.
but boards and committees?
That's a great idea.
Yes.
Yes.
Any
Okay,
issue?
then I need Councilmember Lusk and Vice Mayor Speak to amend.
I would like to amend as stated.
And I will
To
Include.
To what?
Include all boards and
Include,
committees.
council, boards, and committees.
Got it.
I
Amy?
second.
Excellent.
no an additional vote.
Right.
Yeah. We don't need to rescind the prior one, do we? probably doesn't.
You're the Roberts Rules guy, but
I know.
I think the action on this one would
I think we're good.
have the
Supersede
same
it.
effect.
That's right. It does, yeah, because it doesn't, that's right. We're not taking anything away. We're adding to. Any discussion about that idea?
I think we just had it.
Just know, Sam, or somebody, that will have to help, will have to handhold if it happens. Yeah, for anybody, so. All right, let's vote.
I have faith it'll work.
I think it'll work too, yeah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 4-0. Next, we have discussion about the continuity of service plan for critical services.
Before we move to that, Sam checked, and it does look like it would apply, the legislation would apply to bodies that either make decisions or recommendations to the governing body. So it sounds like it'll apply to them as
good.
well. So that, but again, depending on what it is, it may be more or less practical for some.
Is there any update on where they are in?
I don't know, sorry. There. Checking my email, and Governor Bill Lee is holding a conference tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. to share updates regarding the state's reactions to the current crisis.
They might announce it then if they get to it.
So that's basically it. So
I'm sure between TML and MTS,
Yeah.
we'll know when something comes down on it.
So Boyd and I have been involved in a couple of conference calls, one that every town, every county in Tennessee is struggling with the exact same thing we are. Of all the continuity of operations plans that exist, there weren't many out there floating around for pandemics, for global pandemics. So the decisions we're making, I mean, in the police departments and hospitals and fire departments, everybody's struggling with this. So it's okay to, as we discuss this, you know, to not have answers to every question, and that's the idea, is to create they're called COOPs, continuity of operation plans, and create our COOP. That's what we got to do. And the givens, jump in and correct me as you almost always have to if I'm wrong. You know, fire and police are obvious. And then as we discuss the other things, we have a water company, so we supply water, so that's very important. And trash pickup being a part of health as well is important. Those were the 4 most important, but in addition, we talked about inspections. The inspections department, of things that are going on, projects and things that are underway, those are also important.
So, in relatively short order, we have put together a plan basically for worst case scenario, and we can, you know, we have general operations day to day as is the norm, and then we have, if we really go to fairly good extremes, then if council chooses not to do that, backing up from that is a lot easier than not having all of that thought out. So that's what we, with the limited amount of time, since this meeting was called, that's how we approached it. In different groups or individually met with the department heads. The group, we met with Loretta yesterday and talked again today. Met with water, fire, and police this morning, and have talked to Jared as well. And you don't think a lot about Parks and Rec in terms of critical services, but there are things that they do that really could come into play. So I'll just kind of run down what we thought about if we really take action to minimize risk of exposure to our employees. And without going into a lot of detail, because frankly, it's something I didn't think about till this weekend. I'm closing in on 60. We have 10 people that work in this building, and I'm the third youngest. Most everybody's in mid to late 60s or older. They're in a high-risk group.
Yep.
Some other underlying medical things as well. So I don't feel old, I am old, but in this group, it really kind of puts it in perspective that if something were to happen here and there's transmission, we have some very important people that stand in harm's way. So that's kind of the motivation for looking at this from that perspective. So if we took those actions, we'll start with the water department. If we close town hall, business still has to continue. We've checked with the post office. We could have them hold mail, and I could pick that up on Mondays and Thursdays. On those days, I would be here, and probably Sherry would be here. We would go through the mail, get all payments that are in, segregate the junk stuff, make sure everything's recorded, and ready for the next day, be here to answer phones and all of that. On the following days, one of the other employees would come in, I would be here, and they would come in and be able to credit payments to accounts, do the things like that that need to be done. Answer emails, take messages for other things that need to be done. So probably at least 4, if not 5 days, there will be people here to do things that need to be done. But other than myself, they will probably be here one at a time.
The door would be locked.
Right. And we would have something on the door that said, if you need a building permit, call this number.
Mm-hmm.
If you need water turned on, call this number. We can set it up so that if you call and leave a voicemail and say, I need water turned on at this address, our system will send a WAV file to Shirley's email. So she gets that automatically and is then able to call the person that's going to be responsible for turning people's water on, and they go out and turn that water on, and no two people have ever been face to face. So we can do that. If someone calls and wants to make a payment by credit card, we can tell them when to call in to do that. So we've looked at how we cover all of the services that we need to provide and do it in a way that it doesn't require face-to-face contact. When you look at building inspection, they now have iPads that the forms and everything they need are loaded on.
Are you leaving water
Just on the
building side?
the
Personnel side.
in-house part. So that's where a lot of our at-the-counter business is.
I have a question.
Mhm.
You talked about answering phones, and I don't know the day-to-day operations, but I'm wondering if we can even scale that down further. Can we have call forwarding so that it can
Sure.
be done out of their
Yeah.
home?
Right.
Because I too have thought of that already, about how many town employees we have in the high-risk age group, and that really that's the panic.
Right.
Mhm.
So
And-
I
and
would like
that's-
them to be home as much as possible.
You know, when somebody's here and available, if they can answer the phones and deal with it then,
Mhm.
I think that's the best scenario. The more someone can talk to a person when they call,
Right.
the better. But to the extent necessary, calls can be forwarded, or again, the message can say, if you will leave a message, that will be automatically forwarded to the person that can call you back. I don't want people waiting for days
Right.
to get a
Sure.
response.
But more
Yeah.
specifically to her point, could the calls be forwarded automatically so that their job was to answer the phone calls from home?
Right.
Yes. It would, we would probably have to do that with a few people because of the different questions questions about things that Sherry does day in and day out, Diane and Shirley aren't gonna know anything about,
And if
often
it
vice versa.
requires looking up an account or doing something like that, they won't have that ability
No, I get
from their
that,
home,
but then
so-
somebody still could have answered it and trafficked it.
That's true.
And, that follows through with what he was saying. That's trafficking it without it needing to bounce one more time before it gets trafficked. It says, okay, that'll have to be this person, I'll let them know to give you,
Basically have an operator
Mhm.
to handle screen and forward calls or messages.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think everybody, social media is kind of a really good outlet right now. I have faith in our citizens too, that they'll be patient, knowing that this is very new. This is not
Unprecedented.
something we've dealt with, and we do want to be cognizant of the high-risk employees. That's one of the purposes of the meeting. So I'm not trying to make it harder on you guys at all. I'm more so kind of brainstorming and thinking, all right, how can we make it even easier for them not even to have to come in the building?
Yeah, and that's
Because then
what
you
we're
have to have
suppo-
somebody come clean too, so you got another person out.
Right, that's what we're
So-
supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Right.
It's-
And that's,
So,
but
just a
to
thought.
enter payments into accounts and all, there's gonna have to be people here. The idea is to segregate it so that there's one
Mhm.
person here doing something one day, something else the next day. And in between, you'll see we actually have cleaning and sanitizing on the schedule during this whole time when they're switching out.
Okay.
So again, a lot of it there is, we focused on water, that's a bulk of counter business and how we can handle all that. We're confident that we could do that. On the water side, one of the things that we can do, in fact, I think, local government who handles our billing software and everything was surprised we don't already. Now that we're in the system that we have, where there's not a minimum and you pay so much for up to so many gallons, there's really more latitude, so we're not gonna harm somebody. You're gonna pay $6 each month, and you're gonna pay for whatever water you use. If it varies one month to the next, when it all washes out, you're still only paying for the gallons that you use. So what we could do is go to average billing. We've got about 6 months behind us with monthly billing. We could go in and look at what everybody's average bill has been and establish that and bill them that moving forward, and not have to read meters for a month or two, and then we could go back and level everything out. And if there's a large discrepancy, we could even do that over a few months for folks. So it's,
Is that something that you guys could jump on tomorrow and start figuring out what needs to happen?
Could we, I noticed, like EPB has said they're not going to interrupt service.
already done that.
Okay.
That one I'm gonna ask forgiveness instead of permission. Yeah, that's late fees and turning off water. We're already said we're not gonna do that.
Yeah.
We can't change established fees and rates and all of that, but a late fee doesn't fall into that, so.
Do we need a council action to go to average billing? Because the council,
I think this will cover it, resolution will cover it.
okay. I think one of the minimum things it mentioned is that our water board sets the rates.
Sets the rates by ordinance, and the wording on this basically allows that, but that's why I want to go through all of this to make sure you guys are good with it on the front end.
Anybody have any thoughts on average billing? That sounds like a great solution to me.
It sounds like yeah.
Customers would probably like it too. Some would, I mean,
Right.
some won't. I mean,
Well, initially, we thought about simply, we used to bill quarterly, and just skipping a billing, and Adam actually brought it up and said, have you ever thought about just averaging it? Some places do it on a regular basis. They'll actually read this month, and then you'll get 1, 2, 3, whatever months of average billing, and then they do another reading and adjust everything out.
I think average is better than skipping, because I think people are
Yeah.
still getting used to the
Right.
monthly being
Yeah,
the same
it's-
as it was as quarterly, because I know
Right.
mine went way up.
So I think that's a better solution. So he's earning his keep already. But that then means we don't have to be out reading meters, which is taking up a lot of our time. In that group, to me, the threat is that if one gets sick, they work in such close proximity to one another. If one gets sick, they may all get sick. And if they're all sick, and then we get a water main break, we don't have anybody to fix it. So we'll have someone designated that will come in and turn on people's water, turn off water if somebody moves out, handle work orders, one calls, marking lines, things like that they'll do on a as-needed basis. And then obviously if there's a water main break, they'll all come in and work on it. They'll only perform critical work, emergency repairs, turn-offs and turn-ons, new installations.
Can I ask something about that?
Mhm.
Again, because we're just discussing this. If you have somebody in a household that is sick, but the person, the other person's not sick, and they're coming out to work on something, the person coming out may not be sick, but they may have somebody at home who's sick. Is there a way for us to formalize that process? Like if you're being
Talking about
called,
employees.
I'm talking about employees, if you're being called out for an emergency and your spouse is at home in bed,
Right.
been sick for a week, but you're fine.
With the coronavirus?
We're just
They're-
sick.
The thing
They're-
is, people are not going to know if they have the coronavirus. They're just
No,
not
there's
going to know.
only one confirmed case in Hamilton County.
Yeah, it's
But the
'cause-
CDC recommendation is if someone is sick in your home, the whole family should stay home,
Exactly, yeah, so,
in their house, like not
Yes.
leave for,
Right.
for
And
what is
that's-
it?
So that
How
person
long?
shouldn't be able to go, can't go out
No.
on the
well,
call.
they can, but we're not doing anything mandatory here, so. It's tough. How do you, have you had that discussion with department heads and
We've
their
had it
employees?
specifically, well, this scenario right now is hypothetical still.
Yeah,
Right.
That discussion that if you are sick, regardless of circumstances, regardless of your leave status, anything else, you stay home.
what if your significant other is sick?
Then in this case, and especially if, well, not especially if we don't do these things, then that probably needs to be the protocol, yes.
Is it 7 days or 14? I can't remember.
14.
It is 14 days.
Because the point, obviously,
Right, right,
is
is the
we can't
incubation period.
transmit, like people, so,
Right.
you can't ask somebody to break a quarantine to go fix
Right.
a leak, even if it's an
Exactly.
emergency on our part. It's still, you can't do that, so.
And that kind of rolls back around to the Parks and Rec guys who in the past have worked to assist the water department quite a bit. So if Adam's staff dwindles because of illness, we do have some fallback that those guys could help out some too.
And it could be the other way around
Could
too,
be the
if
other way
anybody
around.
on
Right.
his
Right.
staff
So
gets
that's,
sick.
as far as the operational side of water, we can pare it down to where everything's handled by phone, text, email. People are sent out to do things that they need to do, but they're not working in close proximity with each other daily. And we reduce the work, we reduce the time at work, but we take care of the critical.
How much going out and hooking up, new connects? how much of that happens realistically?
It varies. There's not a lot of new taps, putting in new meters and all, not a lot of that. Turning on and off water for new customers, somebody's moving in, somebody's moving out, that really varies quite a bit.
Can we have a protocol for them if they go to clean the surfaces they're gonna be working on? And, because there's no PPE for water department personnel.
No, but the likelihood of contamination of a water meter is, I think, fairly minimal.
And we're also keep in mind, we're talking like a good 8-week period. If it goes beyond that, I think we can revisit, if we have a situation that comes up where we've got an unusually large amount of people turning on or turning off. I mean, I think what you've laid out so far is perfectly acceptable for the next 8 weeks. I think we just be mindful of not pushing this out any further until we get there, because I think that also tends
There's
to
still a lot of
create fear and
unknowns
panic
about how
and-
this is gonna,
Yeah.
So I think maybe I think we're good for the next 8 weeks. Does everyone agree?
No, I think so.
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Fire and police are pretty straightforward. Just wanted to give you some information on, and I printed out, but I think I got 2 fire department ones instead of the police. They have already restricted all things like station visits and going out and doing inspections, fire inspections, pre-plans. All of that's been put on hold. Taking additional measures to sanitize equipment and all of that. Emergency dispatch protocol, they won't be going on medical calls unless they're critical patients or something like that. Police are not going on medical calls, except if requested, they'll go by and stand by outside. If needed, they'll go in, but they're basically a step system so that if it's an unusual call, fire thinks they ought to be there, they'll go, but they're gonna stay outside. If something happens inside, they need them, they'll let them know and they'll come in. It's really about all we can do to make sure that we're there to do the job we need to do, but we do it as carefully as possible. And we'll get back to some of the things we'll do on sanitizing station and stuff like that. We circle back around to Parks and Rec, which we're about to do. Here we go. In Parks and Rec, like we've mentioned, softball and baseball leagues, though they're not town, they made a call to suspend the season.
May I say something before you get into particulars that's on a higher level with this? In one of the calls, the county health director recommended, of course they can't tell you to do it, to not close parks and the like. Because you want people to have an opportunity to be out, but then practice social distancing while they're there.
We haven't closed any, right?
No, we haven't. I mean, though suggestions come in, and that kind of thing, and this is to talk about everything, all the stuff that we're dealing with. Are you gonna talk about sanitation at parks and those kinds of things, or?
Yeah.
Can I? Okay.
One of the things the Parks and Rec will do, we have, and I don't know the name of it, we call it a fogger. It's probably not what it's called, but we have a device that will ionize and fog and sanitize areas. We have acquired, I think one of the last batches available, the recommended sanitizing agent for Corona, along with other things. So each day, Jared or one of his staff will go to Town Hall, Fire and Police, this fire and police station, fire station 2, depending on operations, they could even do public works. They could go to those places 3 times a day and hit work surfaces, desks. It literally, you can put it on anything. It's a 1-minute dry period, and then you're good to go. Do the park restroom facilities twice a day, in the morning and afternoon or evening. So that will, the places where we still have people working, that staff will be doing that every day. The pool, we're in the process of filling that, getting it ready. We don't know what the summer's gonna hold, but that's a process that still has to take place. So each day they'll go through and check the baskets and chemicals and everything, do the backwash if needed. Because if we don't do those things, the pool's gonna,
Right.
we'll have to
Yeah.
start all over in a month. So that'll be done in the morning, afternoon. We've still gotta pick up trash at Alt House, Rainbow Lake, Norrisfield, Sunset, Overlook, Wagner Field, the park here, Marion Driver Fields. We'll check those Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays and make sure that they're emptied. If it appears that because school's out and people are using them more, we need to do it more, we will. And then ground maintenance will basically be suspended, except on an as-needed basis. We want people to use the parks. If grass starts getting high and a problem, Jared will assign a person to go take care of that. Usually they hit it as a swarm. They all hit one, get it done, and move to another one and get it done.
Are those folks wearing PPE? Not necessarily the mowers, but the people who are cleaning bathrooms and playground equipment and the like. Is there a need for that there?
If they're not touching it, if they're using this equipment to fog and coat everything and sanitize it that way, then there shouldn't be a need.
Obviously, the
The
first concern-
availability is another issue of whether
That's
we
true.
don't have it.
The first concern obviously is for the health of the
Right.
employee and the people there,
Right.
but, the second concern is that as far as continuity is concerned, if you did have 1 or 2 employees in a small department, and all of our departments are small, get sick, that department's gonna shut down pretty
Right.
much. Then you've gotta get people to come in, and you probably can't, and then you don't have continuity of operations at that point.
Right. So that would be the approach there, and the other things that they can do in addition to normal operations, to help protect and sanitize the facilities that are in operation, at least to some degree. Public Works, we've talked to Loretta, and they can pretty much cease operations for a period, handle emergency calls only if we've got a major issue with the road or something. What we would have to continue to do is sanitation, meaning trash pickup. We have three or four drivers that can operate the automated truck. So we could rotate. If we were going to do that, I would suggest rotating a driver per week, so that one driver does it this week, another driver does it the next, as opposed to switching out every day and having more secondary contact that way.
If we're gonna close the transfer station and close the gate, I assume that would probably be what we do. Can we use our town's newsletter? Obviously, we're gonna wanna communicate most of this stuff.
Right.
But just to ask people not to clean out their garages and
Right.
not start, because what will happen if the transfer station's closed is they will stack the stuff up on the sides of the road, waiting for that extra pickup, and that's an extra thing that we won't be doing, right? That won't exist. The extra
It
brush
won't
pickup.
exist for 8 weeks.
8 weeks, but you don't want
Yeah,
for
yeah.
8 weeks things
Yeah.
piling by roads. If you, and you've probably seen it, the amount that
Mhm.
comes to the transfer station on the weekend is it's phenomenal, yeah. And that's generated locally for the
Right.
most part. So we need to ask for help in not generating as much of that. And I guess you're gonna get to, and you may have it in your non-essential services, how recycle and trash, how those things are related.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let me go back to,
Yeah,
in addition to we run the trash pickup 5 days a week. And also on Wednesdays, we do, backdoor garbage pickup for elderly, people with disabilities and so forth, so we would have to continue to do that. We have at least a couple people that know that route well, so we could do the same thing. One Wednesday, one person can do it, the next, the other, and we could swap it out, so it's divvied up some. So that would be the only ongoing critical element there as far as health and safety of the citizens. Obviously, if there's an issue with the road, a storm drain clogs, something, we can call people out as we need them, as few as necessary to get those addressed like we are in the water department. The one thing about you had mentioned that you were at Recycle and everybody was kind of, yielding to everybody and keeping a distance and all, but at the same time, we've often argued when we've talked about alternatives for how we're doing recycling, that is a social hub of the mountain. And it's hard to argue that and then say, oh, we can leave it open, that'll be fine. It's a decision to be made, but if we were to close Recycle, all the more reason we have to make sure that we keep the trash pickup going, because once somebody's recycle bin's open, or full, that's going to start going into the trash. So that's probably going to increase the amount that we pick up too, which is unfortunate, but it is the way it is.
It doesn't sound like we have to make that decision at this point. And because what I'm thinking is, like, from a national level, every news station across America is like, use this time to clean out closets, all those projects. I mean, people are not gonna, as much as we would like that to be the case, I don't think people are gonna do that. And I think by shutting these things down, like today, is probably gonna create additional problems. Maybe we take that part a little slower.
well, but what is likely to happen is Orange Grove stops their employees as well.
That's right. Have you had any contact with them?
I noticed that, they're in the process of getting a new person, but something happened with that. But Jimmy he was there last week and just stayed in there with the door closed the whole time. And he is high risk, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And I mean, he really comes out just to push the buttons on the compactors.
Yeah, put on a Saturday, that's a steady stream. And if, I'm not proposing we do this, but I thought maybe even if we had to, citizens, we get some folks to run that, and they're, somebody who's saying, hey, we're open, but keep your distance.
Right, so the direction is, if you can work from home, please do it. If, but people are to maintain, your regular work schedule, and I think those are the accommodations we're making. And then common sense, wash your hands, use hand sanitizer, wipe down, operators. If he's pushing a button, then he needs to be wiping it down before and after. If we can get someone else to fill in, yes, but I think it is important to keep some things still
Do
going.
we have, do we provide wipes or anything for the carts up there at the recycle center?
I know
No.
Like, that would be an totally easy way to transmit.
Yeah, right?
You can't find the sanitizers or the wipes or any of that
Oh.
stuff, unless you go to Hickson and buy them from some guys who are.
Well, then,
Well,
if
sorry,
people
they're
are
not
gonna
mixed.
come up there and recycle, then they need to, bring their own, I guess.
Well, that's my point.
Hand
Is it
sanitizer.
possible that we try to start a citizen-led movement that says, hey, here's how we're going to do it?
Even just some signage up there that says, here are the current regulations for the recycle center under the circumstances.
Could you have a no more than so many people in here at once, just like you do with buildings? I mean, think about it like a public gathering.
Then you're gonna have somebody that's gonna closely monitor
And
that
that's
and
not gonna be the
enforce
Orange
it.
Grove folks.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem we actually have to deal with.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? How do we do that? We don't want to, so if I'm restating his point, this is a community hub. with-
It is a community hub. What we're trying to do is prevent the spread of this virus. And if that is a community hub and people are bringing their garbage up there, and the chances of somebody coming in contact with that virus and it lives on cardboard and, for I don't know how many hours, but I don't think that makes sense. And I don't think we can ask somebody from Orange Grove to have to oversee. That's a big responsibility.
Is this worth trying to
And
get?
liability.
Well, is it worth trying to get a community conversation going for, using social media where everybody's talking about it, saying, look, and then we could have, if we can, a phone meeting. Well, I mean, we're
Because think
giving
about
him the
this-
authorization to make the decision anyway.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think this is not the time for the community conversation. I think it's time for a decision. I think we make a decision because the time lag of what do you want to do? What do you want to do? What
Well-
should we do is every day this is changing and evolving.
Exactly.
So I feel like whatever the decision is, we make the decision and then we move forward.
Well, we're giving him the opportunity to make some of those decisions more
Okay,
quickly
I
with
have a
this resolution.
suggestion about this. I think, and we don't know what the transmission rate has been in Hamilton County because we have one case that's diagnosed officially. We know that there's more of it around us. We just don't know where it is. And I think we're going to know more in the next week or 2 weeks or whatever. Maybe we need to have a short term, for the next
2 weeks.
period of time. This is our recommended process of how to deal with the recycle center. I was glad to get out of the house on Saturday and go recycle, to tell you the truth. So people are, wanting to kind of clean things out of their house. I think the Clothes House and St. Timothy's Thrift Store have both closed because people are cleaning out closets, but they don't want everybody's donations right now because they don't know who's touched it or where it's come
Right.
from. And, I'm not saying I think we should close the recycle center, but I think that I think we need to have some recommended rules about, what it's going to be. Like, you have to, even if we can't provide wipes for the carts there, you got to use hand sanitizer before you touch them. And, this is at your own risk. For the foreseeable future, we would like to keep it open. We're going to monitor the situation closely. If there is spread indicated on Signal Mountain, then that's going to be a game changer.
Right.
But we're not there yet.
And I would agree with that. And then I think in the meantime, I'm not saying, I think we do try to get a conversation going, but I think as council members, as town manager, it's our responsibility to make a decision. That's why we called this meeting. We're all at risk by just having a meeting. So, the CDC recommendation is not to have meetings, and that's exactly what we're doing. So we make the decision and then start community awareness and trust that the citizens of Signal Mountain will be responsible in their recycling, in their trash, in their cleaning out. And if they're not, then we may have to make a tougher decision. We may,
Yes.
in 3 days from now, be mandated to stay in our homes. We don't know.
But the decision might
So-
be to close it.
Right, and
It
it
might
might be,
be.
but I don't think we do that
I just don't think
today.
we're there yet, but I think that we could be there. We might be there next week. I just think the first case that you hear about on Signal Mountain,
Nobody's going anywhere.
everybody's going to be, I'm going to be scared. We're all going to be nervous. So, but we just don't know what we don't know. So we're a little bit, it's unfortunate, really, but we are where we are.
Well, we could mitigate the risk with those carts by just kind of stacking them up behind a little cabin where
Yeah,
nobody sees them.
that's right.
It's
I
not
think we
that
get rid
big
of
a
the
deal to
carts.
make 2 or 3 trips. Maybe you could use the exercise. or
Right, get some
something.
extra steps in.
Yeah.
Let's get
Good
rid of the
idea.
carts.
Yeah, and that's an immediate remedy.
Yes.
Bill, you are full of great ideas today. So glad
Happens
you're
on-
here.
It happens once a year.
Nah, you have more than that.
That's, that was my
Right.
point earlier. Do you, yeah. Right, the person who's there
Well,
for the,
is Orange Grove not gonna do it, or?
he's older, retired, and a smoker.
And he's the
We-
only one there at
Theo-
any given time, right? So it's very similar to what we're putting in place in the actual town, like in our building, right? One person's
Well-
gonna be there at a time.
We have, of course, again, all of this is hypothetical,
Right.
till you guys tell me what you're comfortable with. But theoretically, if we are limiting operations in Public Works, we have some younger staff members that could be doing that instead.
I think that's a really good idea.
And let's give that person the option too, because I'm assuming they're paid. It's
I
not
mean,
volunteer.
I think there probably would be people on our, who work for the town that would be willing to, do you think? We could ask.
And take it home to their family. Think if it was one of your kids.
Yeah.
Would you want them doing that and then coming home to your house where they're interfacing with the public all day?
I'm not
I don't
just-
mean to personalize that to anybody, but I think that's the way, that's the way to consider that, is if it was your kid.
But you absolutely did.
Well, I'll say it for mine. It was my
It's
daughter.
okay.
It was my
It's
daughter
okay.
who the job that she did, she can't do now because the store hours have been cut back. But if she said, "Hey, Dad, should I go do this?" I'd say,
Now, when you're talking about manning it, what I'm talking about is just being there and working the compactor, and that's pretty much it.
And I
But,
think
I
that
mean,
would be an
that's,
adult
again-
decision. I mean, that's like
Right.
that's on the individual. That's not, I'm not gonna ask my parents' permission if I can go do that. If I'm 28 years old, I'm gonna decide if I wanna do that or not. I mean, I think everybody's having to make personal choices like that. So if somebody's willing to do it, to stay in the, there's a place to sort of stay with the door closed. I don't know. I mean, it's either that or just close the recycle center completely for the time being.
which
Well-
is maybe
And
the
what would,
option.
do you feel like
That's-
that's what we should do?
But
I think we should too, and I hate it.
that's exactly
Okay.
what I was getting ready to say. I mean, the idea of this meeting is for you guys to,
I
but
didn't
Well,
hear
I'm
what you
coming to
said.
My
that too. I
opinion
mean, I
is
agree.
we
Is that
should
your
just close it.
recommendation?
I'm with you.
I mean, if your boss asks you to come in and do something,
I know,
is
you're
there
not-
really
how do you
much of
say
a
no?
choice?
That's right.
If that's your opinion and it's your department, then that changes everything to me, because you're doing it every day and you have a better understanding than we do. Okay.
There is.
Okay.
Okay.
I have another question
I
before
agree
we,
with it.
it's very similar, because you were talking about Loretta's department, and I'm not trying to single you out, but are the director level, is that a position, like, are you able to do your job from home? Okay,
Good.
because I don't know how to do this tactfully, I would prefer you to be home.
yeah, we've
Yeah.
already had that discussion.
Okay, I was trying to make sure, and I don't know how, like, what's the etiquette, I don't know, but I'm also a nurse
So,
and care about you.
I would,
So.
I would move that we close, if we don't, I don't know if we need to do that, but I think we should close it. If this turns into a 3-month thing, we may have to figure out, okay, it depends, on humps and curves and peaks and all those kinds of things, what's happening, where it might make sense. Orange Grove may say, hey, we're dying to have people come back, if it's possible, or it may be that the community is saying, is there any way we can do this? We will volunteer. We're willing to self-regulate. We don't know how this is all going to unfold, so
Why
any
don't-
decisions we make now are not forever.
Yeah, why don't we do this? So the YMCA just closed, they're closing tonight.
Yeah.
Until March 30th as an emergency childcare facility for healthcare workers. So maybe that's a good guideline. Why don't we close it until the 30th? We can revisit it. Let's see where we're at, because the truth is, it does change daily. And that gives you a little latitude too, and I think it kind of, that's
Yeah.
a good compromise.
That's a good call.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
So is
Now we
the-
just have to communicate that to everybody
Oh, that's gonna be
within the
fun.
town limits.
It'll
I'm
get
gonna
around
let
pretty
you
fast.
handle social
Yeah,
media
no,
because
no,
I
it'll
am
work.
off, man. I don't even want to
There
hear what's being said. It's
One less
stressful.
opportunity for you to accidentally bump into a friend.
So we should make some provision.
I think the
to-
mayor should take the lead on that.
Thank you.
I'll back you up with a like.
We should make some provision to deliver additional trash carts. Because in our case, we have one of those little small ones,
That's what we have.
and we go to recycle twice a week. And
Do
so.
we have any of those like readily available that? How many? Do people pay for them?
Can we burn? That's a good idea. Burn trash. I didn't think
Okay.
about that. There's so much.
So if
money.
people, so that, for as long as they're available. Touching my
Yeah,
face.
if this continues, and it's likely, but hopefully it won't, but if it continues and it goes on for a while, all these things are gonna have to be revisited over and over, and it's gonna, we're in a situation where every decision we make is going to be second and third and fourth and fifth guessed as the consequences of those decisions come down. And I saw David Brooks, a conservative writer, something he said he wanted to write a book, and I don't remember which plague it was. He started doing some research on what happened. It was one of the great ones. He wanted to find out how communities reacted, and he said the hard part was most people, and I'm saying this very soberly, after it was done, were ashamed of the way they acted once things got hard. You know, we're all right now, everybody wants to go, so we just need to know that these decisions affect people, and it's gonna anger some, it's gonna sadden some, it's gonna increase the burden on recycle, and pretty soon it'll be that council that closed recycle center, and now I can't deal with it, and there's great potential for there to be a huge uptick in the number of packages delivered, so people are getting more boxes than ever. You know, there's all kinds of things. This is a global pandemic that's affecting us.
Well, and, you know,
we have to do our part.
I think I
globally.
might have, I don't want to, I think I might have seen a headline that maybe, and I don't know if it was Governor Lee or somebody from the CDC said the social distancing might last for a year or longer. So
Yeah, we don't know.
we don't
Yes, I
know,
know.
but it's likely to. And you know, I think, where was it I read, you know, like we won't look back on this and say we over-prepared, but we could look back on this and say we
Right.
didn't prepare enough, we didn't do enough up front. This is an easy thing that we can do up front to protect our
Sure.
constituents.
But in the meantime, as we look and see, okay, but we do need recycle, just like Bill said, that's a very practical thing. How are you gonna deal with, you know, what you produce on a
People can
weekly
take their
basis?
recycling off the mountain
Assuming that
to
those
Orange
don't-
Grove,
yeah.
can't they, or deliver it? They can.
No, Orange Grove's not doing recycling anymore.
Yeah, but my point is, we may now start looking for a solution that would work, where you limit the number of people. I mean, there are ways that you can solve problems, it's just that we need to make some decisions now.
Well, we can burn cardboard too. It's very, very wet outside. Is that okay? I mean, it is so wet. I have like a waterfall and a lake growing in the back of my house right by my
Just for
fire.
anybody who can't see the fire chief's face, he's saying no.
I mean, just saying.
Loretta?
Let me say this, that the city of Chattanooga is not closing their recycling.
Okay.
Okay, there.
Their facilities are a little different, they're more wide open, you drive right up to the big bin.
Even better.
Dump their stuff.
I think
Oh, that's
this
great.
is turning into a press release for the town of Signal Mountain that we
Yeah,
need
but
to
that's-
release.
She's not on the microphone, so for anybody who's watching this, and hope, there are probably some people watching this meeting, Loretta said the city of Chattanooga is keeping their recycle center open, and it's a different kind of facility that you can drive to and take things, you know, right out of your car. You drive right to it, yeah. I'm only repeating you so that people
Okay.
can hear what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think it's important just to point out too, like, we don't know what's gonna come tomorrow.
Right.
We don't have all the answers, so you do the best that you can with the information we have, and that's what we're doing as a council.
Yep.
And we're gonna hope that we're gonna band together as people, as a human race, and not be pointing fingers. We're all doing the best we can with what we've got.
period. And it's gonna be an inconvenience. And if we make the wrong decision, then we will act and try to make it right.
Correct, exactly.
So
100%.
everybody be kind to one another and in the decisions that everyone's having to make.
Yeah, yeah, but it's not easy.
Good advice.
Okay. So as far as that goes, that's pretty much the rundown. Again, worst case scenario, how we can do really what is being asked of other people and take as dramatic a action as possible to limit exposure, and what we can accomplish while we're doing that. Of course, MAC, the gym and library have been closed. Karen sent me today, it's not that we look for these things, but it's nice when they come along, that the American Library Association is now recommending that all libraries be closed. So like, whew, okay, good. We're okay.
Good job.
We're not by ourselves.
Yeah.
Thank you,
If-
Boyd, for all that work.
Yeah,
And if I might on that, just a reminder that the state Supreme Court
It's on.
came down and there'll be no in-person
No
court
courts.
hearings.
That's yeah.
So, again, while we have this resolution, the reason these things are in the order they are, to the extent possible, I want to make sure you guys weigh in on as much as possible on the front end.
Yeah, and before we head to the resolution, I've talked with some store owners and with some owner of many storefronts, and as well as with Gretchen with the Mountain Business Association. And our local stores are already worried that this could have a tremendous impact. And I mean, the request is just that we be careful, about frightening people, but of course everyone needs to be concerned. But the conversation with Gretchen had to do with the Mountain Business Association, talking with businesses, and there are creative, I know Hummingbird is doing delivery, and I think there may be some others that are doing delivery. So there's some shifting that's taking place already, and they're having conversations about ways to promote our local businesses. So I think we ought to help them out as much as we can safely, as they're trying to survive this thing as well.
One of, some other things that go along with this, if this is the route we take, or you guys want to pare this back or whatever, the same questions to varying degrees come up. In that if people aren't here working, if they're at home working, versus if they're only going to work a few days a week, if they're only going to work when they called out, how are we going to handle pay? And that's something that definitely needs some guidance and input on.
All right, so I think we continue to pay our employees, even the part-time ones. We've already budgeted for it. We have them work where it's safe, as this is my one person, one opinion. We've budgeted for it, so it's not an additional expense. One of the questions, I'm going to put this on somebody else because it wasn't me and it wasn't Boyd in one of the conference calls we came in, but I think it was Jim Coppinger who said, look, we're definitely also trying to figure out how we're going to be able to make sure that people who are working from home are working, because they don't even have methods, no one's done this before. And so I guess it's up to department heads to, maybe ride herd on that and keep assignments that can be up, and the town manager.
And frankly, that level is going to be at the administrative level. That's going to be Sam and Carol and other department heads.
Working from home?
Beyond that, there's
Well,
Cliff maybe can, but that's going to be my administrative staff that'll be doing that.
There's also, and I don't think this applies to employees, but I think there's two things. One, there is a form. Do you remember what the form is? I don't know if it matters.
Not
There's a form for added expenses related to COVID-19 that towns incur, that we're going to be tracking things on to apply for some federal reimbursements that are going to be available. So that's already taking place, although we may not have spent anything yet.
really not seeing that yet.
Yeah. Though we might, if we needed, you know, extra PPE for the fire department or something like that. you know.
I was on a conference call this afternoon at 3 o'clock, and it came from TEMA that municipalities should start tracking everything they use in relation to dealing with
The response.
virus.
It was a,
Because there's already been a state of emergency declared, and it's already been declared, therefore, personnel backfill, equipment costs, things you bought, could be reimbursed, so they ask us at 2:04, we start keeping track.
it's an ICS form.
So there's that side of it. When, because I think this will be a topic of discussion nationally as well, just haven't heard it yet. If what's going through the Senate right now happens and they choose to send money to individuals who work for companies under 500 employees, we would fall into that, I assume, unless there's, does that change, should that change whether or not part-time people are paid? That's, I mean, it's a discussion we need to have.
Right.
Or maybe it'll be mandated to us.
Yeah, I
And-
think we have
and
to
as
see what
of
happens in the Senate.
As of today,
Or
the
we can always
bills that's
decide that.
going through Congress for the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act that was basically gonna mandate that we pay people, it was, a version was passed and it was sent for, technical corrections, which is supposed to be section numbers, punctuation, cross-references, and things like that, and then they changed the body of it. Such as that the conditions, it conditions FMLA leave on the employee's inability to telework. So they added that if you have to not be able to work from home to qualify, and they made substantive changes. So at some point, there's gonna be legislation that's probably gonna tell us we have to pay people, but at this point, what form that's gonna take is,
We don't know.
we don't know.
We don't know. And in addition, yeah, so my opinion, and again, I'm one guy, and obviously we wouldn't, I don't know that we vote on this or not, but I mean, that's why we're doing this tonight. I think since we've already budgeted, we need to pay. Because this is people's real lives, we don't know how long this is gonna go on.
And the vast majority of them are permanent part-time people. I mean, they may work part-time, but they work all year long,
Mhm.
every
Yeah.
year.
Yeah. How does that affect this in any way? Or just, that's just a point?
It's just,
Anyway, I'd like to know what everybody else thinks.
Yeah, I agree with that, but also to the extent possible, think about whatever backlogs exist in any department and hopefully provide some work that folks could take home with them, even if, you know, it's a MAC employee who's, you know, has nothing to do with the library, for example, but be better doing something than just having to sit on your hands.
Well, and I question, so, I don't know how many people you have that work for you, Jared? How many, approximately?
Part-time and full-time?
Yeah.
12.
So if 5 of those people are permanent part-timers, I don't know that that's the case, but let's say 5.
The vast majority of them are part-timers that just work a few hours.
Okay. In your continuity of operations plan, you know, we talked about the mowing and all the different things that happen. How many of those people can be used in those safe positions, assuming they're not sick or a family member's not sick? Do we know that?
Yeah, I mean, he knows what capabilities each employee has. Now, we're also talking about kids that work at the gym, and
Which is closed.
which is closed. So I mean, he has 3.
Carol calls it, we've got 3. That work on a part-time basis, in college, just graduated, but they're here.
Yeah, I'm bringing that up, so, because for the most part, if somebody's job is to rake a field, they can't do that from home. But it's also, if they're not sick, it's the kind of job that you can do in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that, you know, we're not gonna keep the fields in the shape we usually do. We're gonna do that less, but occasionally somebody's gonna have to come out and mow them and weed eat and all, but they're gonna do that by themselves. Another thing that we've discussed, I've asked all the department heads to identify training opportunities. Ask all of their staff if they have
Great.
computer, internet. If you don't have computer and internet, do you have a DVD or a CD player? Between MTAS, TML, TAUD, we can get people signed up and give them training. If it comes down to an audio book on leadership, whatever, just look at any ways that we could optimize return if we're gonna do something like this and they're gonna be home and getting paid. I think that's a very reasonable ask.
Is, this ties in with that. It's gonna seem like I'm going far afield to begin with, but in one of the reports that we got from MTAS today, it talked about staff meetings and trying to not have them if possible. Do you have a way, Jared, and I guess Eric and everybody else, to communicate electronically what you need to communicate with people so that if there was somebody who could work, they could, yeah. And that's current, and everybody's up on it, and
Yeah, they're there. Fire and police are there.
Together 24 hours a day, 365 days.
yeah.
One advantage we spoke about today too is the fact that we do have 2 stations now. Should, heaven forbid, we get an exposure on one fire crew, we could quarantine that station and run everything out of the other station. So we only have,
Technically, we have 3 fire stations within 5 miles of each other.
I mean, but not that we can quarantine, yeah.
Right.
so we could, if something happened, we could still operate just out of one station like we did for years. Not optimal, but we now have that option where a year and a half ago, we would have had one building that was contaminated and we would have to deal with, so that is a plus. But and frankly, I don't mean to butt in, but I agree with your position that I think we have to pay folks, and we also have to consider the fact that we have people that are going to be here working, as always, and how does that look when it's all washed out?
Morale's gonna be a tricky thing now.
I think there has to be some sort of consideration to that. Is it when it's all said and done, they get some extra leave? There's a hazardous duty
Yeah, and that's.
stipend. There's something for those folks that are here working and in harm's way.
Yeah, I likened it to him, you know, it's like hazard pay in the military. You get paid a little bit more when you're in a dangerous situation, and we will have some people who are in riskier situations on a daily basis just because of what they do, but then, you know, some people who won't, so that's,
And some of that is just the nature of the beast.
yeah.
But when you're in a situation where you're
Right.
working a 40-hour week and you're making a 40-hour wage, and somebody else is coming in periodically and working a 20-hour week and making a 40-hour wage, you know, my position is always that things aren't always fair.
Well,
But
and
our job is to try to be fair and equitable to our employees.
I think people are going to be painfully aware of how unfair things are coming in the coming days as this whole thing plays out, because there's a lot of just tough situations we're all gonna have to deal with, and so we just have to deal with that.
Yeah, so again, we gotta do the best we can with what we have. That's
Right.
really all we can do.
You ready to move on towards the resolution? Are you, anything else that you wanna get more on your list?
I would like some degree of direction relative to what we've discussed.
Okay, I was thinking some of that would come as we have the discussion for what this is.
That's fine, but like I said, I would
No, I
would
agree.
Well, I
like
think while
as
we're on the
much.
topic, do we need to make a motion or decide if we're gonna pay people?
Well,
Well, we're talking just part-time, right? The 3 part-time people, or everyone?
Everybody.
everybody, yeah. It's not just 3 part-time, there's a bunch of part-time people.
Oh, that was just your department.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That was just.
I
full
went to
part-
the bathroom
yeah,
for
that's
a
okay,
few
yeah.
minutes.
At the library, the MAC.
Right. You're right.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, if you'd rather have I make a motion that we continue to pay part-time employees for, I'm a little concerned if was 2 years, we'd have to say, boy, that's complicated because the nature of things would change. So this is not in perpetuity.
So let's put, like we've done everything else, let's do it, you know, a section at a time. Because if we, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, if we say we're gonna continue to pay part-time employees, then we have to continue to pay them until this is over. That puts us in a difficult position. So we can possibly do what we've done with every other decision, which is,
Sure.
But if you
Tie
only
it to
put
the
it on
government.
for 2
Yeah, tie it
weeks,
to
are
the-
you
Yeah,
gonna
2
meet
weeks,
again?
2 weeks is not enough.
well, we
The-
can change that, but I'm
Right.
just saying, like, I think being vague is, we don't need to be vague right now. We need to be very clear in that this is, from this meeting, we do it for whatever we determine, and then we can revisit it depending on what changes.
Yeah, well, we know that we're in at least a 2-month period.
8 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, we know we're in at least a 2-month period. So,
And it's just a suggestion because we're talking part-time and full-time, based on what you said, that we would continue to pay full-time employees based on their normal work week and regular part-time employees based on their average hours
yeah,
for the last 6 months.
and that's
What
that's a
their
staff
average
thing.
is for the last 6 months. We would
Based on
pay
what
them
we
that.
budgeted them, I mean, the idea is to pay them based on the departmental
Well,
budgets though, right?
What we budget is a lump sum for part-time employees. So there's, each person doesn't have an amount budgeted to them.
I get that, but when you're making those budgets, you figure out I'm gonna need this many hours. I'm not talking about people, I'm talking about positions now, of things that need to be done.
Right,
Uh,
but
You
different
can look at
people
their
work-
backlog from the last
different
6
people work
months and get an
different hours.
average.
I get that.
So we would look at what they have worked,
Yeah.
make sure that fits within the budget,
Yeah,
and
that's
pay
what I mean.
them on an average of what they've worked.
Right, and just to reiterate, this is money that's been budgeted, and if someone gets sick, they're not switching over to sick pay. They don't have to take their if they're staying home because they might be infected, and they're not gonna be able to get a test to find out if they are, and they're 27 years old, we have to take their word that they're staying home because they're infected, because they're not gonna get a doctor's note that says, we're not
But
gonna
it-
catch up.
Here's, like, at my job, if we're sick, we have to take our sick leave, and we have to use our PTO.
I don't think we ought to do that in this emergency. We want people, if you have people who work and they need that sick leave, and you make them take all of that because of this emergency, there's a greater chance that they're gonna come into work sick.
And some people may not have a sufficient, if they're talking about people with underlying medical conditions, they may not have sufficient to last 2 weeks. On sick leave.
Anybody else? I mean, I think we should not force people to take sick leave.
What's the county doing?
I don't think they,
I'm not sure, other than I know a lot of their offices are doing similar things in terms of minimizing staff. Some of them are cutting their staff in half,
But regarding, like,
rotating.
if someone's sick,
That I don't know. And there's not a standard right now.
but they're making those same decisions, I feel like we should probably look to some,
I just think to the extent that we can give people's lives continuity right now, that's what they need. Like, that's what we all need. And if it's money that's budgeted, you know,
Well, what's the
Just,
difference?
it makes no difference on the budget. Because when they get paid out of sick leave, they get paid out of the same
it's the
fund.
same.
The only difference it will make is when we come out of the back end of this, they'll have more or less sick leave
yeah,
available.
if they lost all of that.
It doesn't impact the budget either
And you've
way.
got an
Yeah.
employee that's at home doing training that's not sick getting paid versus one who now is sick. And now you're gonna have them deduct from their sick leave
Right, like
bank.
that's not
Yeah, you're
equitable
taking
at
from their
all.
bank. Yeah.
And frankly, were this not this situation, most of my positions might be polar opposite. But,
I agree with that.
you know,
Yeah.
this is just so unique that it's not gonna impact the budget.
Yes.
And when it's all said and done, if somebody's sick a week, and let's say this does go for 2 months, if they're sick a week or two, doesn't matter in terms of budget. It's
No.
all being paid out of the same thing.
Right.
They'll have 2 weeks less sick leave when it's over with.
Plus,
But
just,
that's the only difference it's making.
yes.
Haven't heard from you yet, Bill, on this thing, but it sounds to me like our discussion is going towards 2 weeks. I'm not completely sure where you stand on this yet. I think I've made my point clear, and I think, sure Suzanne is, but you two, I don't know for sure.
I mean, I agree that we should take care of our people.
Okay.
I do think that we should use every opportunity to provide them some kind of meaningful work to do while they're at home. And it could be anything, who knows? It's up to Bo. But, and I agree with the formula that you've laid out for how to pay part-time people. And I think we should do it. Whether that's just look at 2 weeks right now or until the governor lifts the state of emergency. I think that's probably
two-
where
or
we'll
two-
end up.
two
anyway,
I think we
but-
talked about 8 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, 8 weeks, 2
Okay.
months. Yeah. I hope the state of emergency is lifted in 10 days.
Absolutely.
That would make me really happy.
Yeah, but,
Yeah, and I'm not saying we don't take care of our
I know.
people. I was
Right.
just saying where I'm working, that's how another company is doing it, and then I was curious what the county is doing, and that kind of gives us a little more direction than.
yeah, and it's absolutely valid.
So I think it's just something we need to talk about. I'm not entirely
Yeah.
sure, and,
I know, this is
you know,
hard.
I don't know.
Yeah,
So I'm just bringing up different points of view.
yeah. Which is what we need now, so it's appreciated.
And again, with a 2-month period, it's not something we can't change beyond that if there's a set period.
2 months from when to when?
From now till what's 8 weeks from now?
If we're gonna vote on this, we need to do it.
So today's
Yes.
March
To-
17th.
I gotta eat.
To May 8th. Probably the easiest way to do it, instead of saying that, would be
Pay periods.
Yep.
for pay period. We just started a pay period yesterday. So including the pay period we're in, would be 4 pay periods would be 8 weeks.
Okay.
That sounds reasonable.
So we move that, I move that we, for the next 4 pay periods, how do we word that?
Provide.
It's ridiculous to say that we pay our employees because we do that we will not penalize employees who stay home.
Well, that's not I don't think
See,
you
here's
say
the- here-
penalize.
here's
We will
the-
not,
here's the-
we
well,
will
and
not
also-
force them to use their sick leave or PTO if they are sick.
Well, I want to
We
make
will-
your point even a little heavier. What if somebody breaks their leg?
I'm sorry, what was that?
What if someone breaks their leg and we need to take sick leave?
Again,
They have a stomach virus.
Well, you don't know on that,
That's not-
anything that's like systemic stuff, but if they fall and hurt their back using a bush hog, that's,
for us or for themselves?
Right.
Yeah.
yeah. See my point?
Mhm.
That, it's a different situation. Do
Let's
we
just
need
keep
to
it
account for that?
simple. We're in a state of emergency. We're voting on 8 weeks. Let's vote on 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And then next thing we're gonna do is talk about a resolution authorizing the manager of our town to have some discretion. And I think we need to trust that
Yes.
he is more
Boyd can
capable
navigate
of
that.
doing that.
Yeah. All right, well, let's word this. Somebody help me with the wording.
How about that for the next 4 pay periods, including this one, we will continue to pay full-time employees the regular wage regardless of work assignment. And we will pay regular part-time employees equivalent to their average wage over the last 6 months,
So if what happens?
regardless of work assignment. I'm sorry.
You have it said in there if they're not coming into work,
Regardless of work assignment,
regardless of work assignment.
if you want to word it otherwise, but that's
I think
the,
that's
that's the notion of that, is regardless how much they work or what they're doing.
So should we get HR in this?
No, I mean, I appreciate your attention to detail, Dan, but I think that covers it.
Yeah,
I think it
okay.
I agree.
does.
And we have, we'll have the documentation of minutes that might expound on exactly what, you know.
Should we phone a friend here and let, or do you think we're okay? Meaning we could call Harry, who's probably watching. I
be
mean,
more
if
than
you
happy
guys
to-
are okay with it, I'm okay
I
with
think
it.
we're
I'm
okay
good
with
with
it.
it.
I'll second that.
I didn't-
hasn't
I
got
can't,
a
I
first.
can't make it.
I will make the motion. Did you
Okay,
write all that
thank you.
down? Can I read it?
You can't read my handwriting. You want me to read it back?
Yes,
Yes, and then I will make that my motion.
Because this chicken scratch. For next 4 pay periods, including this one, continue to pay full-time employees regular wage regardless of work assignment, and part-time employees equivalent to average of the last 6 months regardless of work assignment.
Okay.
Does that sound correct?
I make the previously read motion to approve. Is
I'll
there a
second it.
Thank you.
any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 4-0.
Now, if I may, one more before we move to the resolution. What we went over in terms of continuity of operations plan was, again, what we set out, if we're gonna maximize limiting exposure, limiting access, and all. The direction on that is, if council is comfortable with that, if there is anything within that plan you want to step back, not be as dramatic on or anything like that, I'd rather know that now than get something in place and then try to back up. But, well, and again, I understand that this gives me the authority to make these decisions, but I think it's vitally important that council weighs in on these major operational decisions on the front end.
Yeah. I mean, unless anybody has anything specific to address what Boyd's saying right now, I'd like to read the resolution and get a motion, get it on the table.
Can I
and
get
then-
some clarification on one topic? We talked about closing the recycle center. When will that, do we need to, is that a resolution, or is that just a,
That's good.
I think it's a department. Didn't we say it was a department head?
is
Or
that
did we not
just
vote on it?
Loretta making a decision, or is that Boyd saying, this is
I
what's
think-
happening?
I
And
think the decision was pretty much made.
So-
Did we say, we didn't vote on anything though, did we?
No, but I did have council agreed to close until March the 30th.
Right, 2 weeks.
for 2 weeks,
Right.
it's being closed, and then
That's-
how are we gonna
And then we'll
determine,
reassess. And that can be, I would think,
Well, that's,
how
other-
are we
Boyd's
going to, communicate that?
We will,
let's do a press
probably
release.
what I would suggest is like we did with MAC and we closed the gym immediately, but the library, they were open one more day.
So maybe we
And
should
that
give everybody a
allowed-
couple of days
So
leave.
we can have it operate
That's a good
tomorrow,
idea.
post notices, we'll email blast, we'll Facebook, we'll, do everything we can between now and end of business tomorrow to get the word out.
that it's
And then maybe
closed as of
make
when?
Friday the last day, or
That's,
Saturday?
I mean, it could be,
We do need to let Orange Grove know, because they're the ones who stock it and man it for us.
And then when people hear that, it could be like going out to buy toilet paper. I mean, is everybody gonna come?
Yes, of course they are.
Overload the
Absolutely,
recycle
they're
that's,
gonna do
center,
that.
so-
that's the concern. That's
we
why I
need to
say if we
have-
do a day, that really is a
Everyone's gonna go
mechanism for us
crazy.
to get the word out. Beyond that,
Should
we
we-
may be inviting the hordes.
That's true. Could we provide backup in terms of like having one of our part-time employees go and provide, just be an extra, person there to kind of help facilitate the potential
We can see what we
busyness?
can do.
So do we want to do Friday, Saturday, effective immediately, tomorrow?
So today's Tuesday. We won't get the communication out till tomorrow.
I think Thursday, we close it Thursday. Tomorrow's the last day.
I tend to agree. Honestly, if we're closing it because we're worried about transmission, we can't keep it open.
No.
And have
Right.
people get mass chaos,
We're-
because that's
that-
exactly what's gonna
Yeah.
happen.
That's why I say
And they can go
open tomorrow
downtown.
just gives us some time to get the word out.
Okay.
Beyond that, if we think it needs to close, then I think it needs to close.
And as long as people
Right.
know that they can take their recycling downtown,
Can we do a
you
press
know,
release?
and they have the opportunity
Let's
to get
do
an extra
that, too.
waste can at their house.
Point about the Chattanooga, that they check people's driver's license with their
Oh.
addresses.
Oh, right.
City stickers too, probably.
Can you not, you can't pay for it?
Oh,
I guess
yeah.
I don't wanna-
Mm.
Ugh.
Thanks, Eric. That's good. Yeah, I'm gonna
We'll
say
have
that
to
on the
find out about that.
microphone because I did the other, the fire chief said the city of Chattanooga checks driver's license. And so what we said earlier about maybe being able to go to Chattanooga Recycle may not be accurate. But we'll find that out. I think
Maybe
this
there's
brings up the
county.
point that we need to we need to up our communication with citizens on our email blast and just, it almost needs to be a newsletter
Annoying.
of what's going on. so
Right.
that-
And we need to be really clear, everybody watching, to do their part. Now is not the time to rush to the recycling center.
Right.
We're talking hopefully temporary, and if we
Right.
have to make that decision down the road and open it, we will adjust. But for the next 2 weeks, not everybody's got to recycle. That is not an emergency. It's just not.
Right.
Put your bottles and your bag in your garage. We all have garages. Hopefully, well, oh
Most
gosh,
people
I'm
do.
going to get in trouble for that.
A lot of people
What I
do.
mean is, we don't, because it's closing tomorrow is not an invitation for everybody on the mountain to get all the recycling in there. In the same way, it's not an invitation for everybody to go take all the toilet paper. Let's all be kind to one another and do our part, and for the next for the next 2 weeks, slow down your recycling. And hopefully, we'll have a better answer for you in 2 weeks. I don't think that's too much to ask.
Nope.
All right, do you need that as a vote? Or we're okay? That's just something we're moving forward on? All right, I'm gonna
Thank you
read.
for bringing that up, Susanna, because we did not really solidify that.
So what we're considering next, it's 7:36. Does anyone need a break or can we push
I
through?
took my break, but let's push through.
Okay. We're considering now a resolution declaring a state of emergency within the corporate limits of the town of Signal Mountain, Tennessee, and establishing associated protocols and authorizations for municipal operations. I don't normally read these entire things, but I'm going to now because it has specific points that we can discuss. Sorry. Whereas the state of Tennessee has declared a state of emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the same threat to health and welfare exists within the town of Signal Mountain. And whereas local governments are tasked with adhering to state and federal guidelines for minimizing the potential for person-to-person transmission of the virus, while also ensuring the continued delivery of critical services to their residents. And whereas the effective operation of the town government, short and long term, is directly dependent upon the health and well-being of our staff. And whereas the ability of vendors, contractors, equipment, material, and supplies will likely be hindered by the effects of the pandemic and resulting state of emergency, now therefore be it resolved by the town council of the town of Signal Mountain, Tennessee, that a state of emergency is hereby declared within the corporate limits of the town of Signal Mountain. And be it further resolved that until after revoked, the town manager is authorized to alter work schedules, staffing levels, operations of town departments, employee leave practices, billing practices, and make purchases as authorized under Tennessee Code Annotated 656 34 or 304-3, notwithstanding any municipal purchasing guideline, ordinance, or personnel policy to the contrary. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. I want to say, as we get into this, the question has been raised, are we abdicating our responsibility as counselors? And the answer is no. And one there's multiple points of that. There's a system of checks and balances that happens every day. I'm probably in touch with Boyd way more than he would like for that to be the case. I sign checks. It's not like Boyd can go out and buy a hot tub because I have to co-sign the check or somebody else has to come in and co-sign the check. You guys are all authorized if you filled out the form to come in and do that. So there is all of this that takes place, and anything that happens, we would also end up discussing here anyway. So all of this is on the table and all of it's out front. But what we don't know is what we don't know.
Right.
It's what has to happen in the next 3 days or 7 days or 6 or whatever. And we don't know that one of us sitting at this table isn't going to be sick and not be able to, you know, certainly not come to a meeting, but maybe even do a teleconference if that's what we're having. So we're just setting this up so the town manager can make decisions and keep the town running. And it's our responsibility to pay attention to what he does. And
Exactly.
we will all continue to do that.
And once the, if it does pass the Tennessee legislature that we can have video conferencing for meetings, will that make, I mean, will this still be necessary?
We could rescind this
Or would
next
we?
Tuesday if we had a
Right.
teleconference and
Exactly.
wanted to.
Right, so this is just a temporary fix. It is a Band-Aid. It is not a permanent.
This is not a permanent resolution to affect permanent, down the road. Boyd, how long have you worked for the town?
Total of a little over 30 years.
Okay, and you've been the town manager for how long?
6.
Okay, if we as a town cannot trust our town manager in a state of emergency that has worked for us over 30 years, and 6 years as the town manager, we've got other problems.
Right.
So I personally, I know we're dancing around some things, I have no problem. I implicitly trust our town manager, and if
Thank
we
you.
didn't, we would be having a different conversation, and that would have happened well before a state of
I
emergency.
agree
So-
wholeheartedly.
I mean, this is not, anyway, that's all I had to say.
Sure.
And thank you
It's not
for
hard.
all
Thank
you've
you.
done for the town. It is a very thankless job. So,
The only thing I would ask is that if Bo needs to exceed the purchasing guidelines, the $10,000,
Yeah,
that he just send an email to us individually as a heads up so that if we get any questions from our
right, so there's full transparency
constituents,
there.
we'll-
Yeah,
Right, and if it's more complicated than just that, the telephone works.
absolutely.
And we
Yes.
he can
We're all
call and talk.
neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is not carte blanche to go spend town money. This
Right.
is a reasonable
Right.
request and resolution, given what we're facing.
And keep in mind, when we discussed this and started working on this and putting this together and how to respond to this crisis and take care of the town, the idea of electronic meetings wasn't even on the radar.
Right.
That just happened in the last day and a half.
Right.
I mean, didn't even know it was a thing.
Right, and
So if it becomes a thing, you guys rescind this and we're back to normal operation.
Absolutely.
if anyone wants to be suspicious and angry or concerned, be angry at me. This was my idea that we hold this meeting, that we declare a state of emergency. I discussed it with the town attorney to make sure we were doing it correctly. We did it properly, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And as we were discussing continuity of operations, I said, you'll recall, I said, I don't need to ask your permission to do what I think we need to do, is have this meeting so that we can give him direction, so that we are putting everything on the table and everything's out in the open when we're talking about it, so.
And you've been more
Yeah.
than transparent, and I feel like the council has been transparent. That is a buzzword that has been going on for years, so I appreciate all the work you did to lay out kind of what your plan is. We've got all of our department heads, we've got the chiefs of fire and police here. I mean, this is an exact example of doing the best we can with what we've got, and it's not forever.
Right.
It's for right now.
So let's dig into this resolution that we're looking at now. The second whereas, adhering to state and federal guidelines for minimizing the potential for person-to-person transmission of the virus. That is something that there could be a mandate. There could be a quarantine mandate that comes down next Tuesday. We don't know. And specifically that we can't do that. The federal government can do it. But this declaration of a state of emergency does put penalties in that it becomes a misdemeanor to not follow the guidelines. You recall reading that?
Mhm.
So if the federal government says or the state government says you can't have more than 10 people in a place by law, it becomes a misdemeanor to do that.
Right.
So just to be clear, that there's actually some action that becomes associated with this as it becomes more
Right.
intense, which we hope it doesn't, but. Let's see. Yeah. Vendors, contractors, equipment, and materials, one of the things that came up in one of the calls was finding out if your vendors have continuity of operation plans as well. So who potentially, for instance, West Rock, kind of taking care of that because of closing the recycle center, but Sandtech, if Sandtech, in the course of doing trash pickup, we kind of walk through everybody who touches that operation. And the breakdown point is if Sandtech says we're not delivering anymore. But even then, we would have the opportunity to take it ourselves.
We should, it would change our operation in terms of time and everything, but we could do that. And we have checked with Sandtech, and they feel that they're in a position to continue doing pulls as they do now, which is maybe twice on Monday and just about every day. With the new facility, we have a keyed gate, so they have a code, they can come in, close the gate behind them, do the pull, leave the same way, so people can't come in and out. So with the secured facility, they can still make the pulls, somebody doesn't have to be there. And we can continue to do the trash pickup, dump it at the transfer station, they continue to get it.
Have we heard from local government, for instance, if they have any kind of a plan?
Not in terms of a plan, they have processes in place to help us establish remote access and all of that. So I anticipate their scenario will probably improve as municipalities make these changes and there are less people on fewer workstations
Yeah,
and
and
all.
they should be able to work from home of all people.
Most of the time,
Majority of the time.
we have,
What's that?
they have the ability to BOMGAR, it's called. We can basically log in, contact them, give them access to our computer. It's kind of creepy sometimes, but, you know, they can actually work on our computer remotely from their offices. So I think we're in pretty good shape there.
So any specific vendors that fire and police or any other public works ones that we need to check with?
We're in the middle of setting up a construction project, that contract, so, I don't really know how that's gonna go. We've got some lead time, that contractor has to order materials, and so there may be some, at some point, if it goes, if it goes that far, we might have somebody come and do inspections, something like that. We've got a contractor that's ready to go work on the project. So we'll just have to play that by ear.
But again, that's one of those things that, you know, in this case, Cliff could schedule to come in and do. So we would have an employee on site, do the inspection, and that's it. So, I mean, I don't think any of those things are gonna be difficult to manage, just like the building inspectors. If we close that down, we close down the construction and affect numerous people. So, they work off of their laptops, let them take their vehicles home for a few weeks so they can come straight, go to the job site, do the inspections, schedule them so they can cluster them, come up, do everything they need to do, and then go home and do their paperwork. So I think we can manage those types of things.
Do we know, like that contract we just approved with, was it CTI last week? Have you heard from those type of vendors or those things going forward?
Yeah, as far as I know, I have not spoken to them specifically about this moving forward, but I don't anticipate any issues with that in that line of, or that field.
Should anything wreck, you guys deal with moving dirt a lot, and fixing and mowing and,
No, most of the stuff that we have right now, we're setting in place. You know, we have our Coca-Cola and things of that nature, but with baseball and softball, postponed, with pools 6, 7 weeks from that point, so.
And a lot of those things too, if we have lights go out on a field, again, we wanna make open space available and all this, but the critical nature of getting those repairs done diminishes as well.
sure, yeah.
So if it takes us an extra week or two to get something done, it's not gonna be an issue.
Are you guys having discussions about, perhaps other projects that could be worked on that you normally can't get to because of the daily demands of ball games and that kind of stuff?
I mean,
Yeah.
department-wide, or town-wide, through the various departments, again, just like the training, what can we get accomplished? What haven't we had time to do? That's been topic of discussion, how we optimize the return on these funds that we're gonna be spending and you've approved.
I think we should move to close the discussion.
Anybody else have anything you want to toss in?
No.
You guys all good? Contract materials, state of emergency, we went over that. Authorized to alter work schedules, staffing levels, operation of town departments, employee leave practices, billing practices. Could you, within this, no, you can't. I'm comfortable with it. Anybody have any concerns? So we have a motion.
I
and a
just
sec-
think one thing, I do think if there is a quarantine that comes down, or if there's some big like game changer, like the state borders are closed, or like any kind of big consequential action that I've heard, I don't know if we need to have, additional conversation, but we just kind of just have to have that line of communication open at all times, because you just never know how people are going to respond to the amount of fear, that could be out there. Hopefully people can stay calm and rational and all that, but I don't know. I don't know what else could come up potentially,
Yeah,
but I'm just
well,
saying.
we don't know what we don't know, and fortunately, we are also not we're not the healthcare, professionals. within
No,
this. We have
we're
to
not.
keep a town running. It's kind of what we're here for. So,
And as mentioned and suggested, I try to make a habit often, even on things that I don't necessarily need approval for, to get
Yeah.
you guys to weigh in and get consensus on.
Just if,
By the same token, you guys can always call me. I mean, that's hopefully goes without saying, but I feel like I need to say it. If there's any question, any concern, anything at all, just call me.
and same thing
I will,
during this.
yeah.
Tell us how we can help.
Yeah, in the almost 4 years that we have been working with Boyd, he has been nothing but upfront, and if you have any questions, you've reached out, so and I would assume you would do the same. I don't see why that would change.
Probably now more than ever.
Now
That's what
more
I'm
than ever,
thinking.
yeah. All right,
Okay.
let's move to vote. Any additional discussion? Having a motion and a second, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 4-0. Any other business? Hopefully it involves like pizza being delivered or something. Hearing none, we are adjourned.
Who's sanitizing these? Breathing all over.
I'll take care of it.